In the midst of the steel and glass jungle that is New York City, there are people whose lives hum in quiet, almost invisible rhythms, unnoticed by the world around them. Olivia Anderson was one such person. She wasn't a star. She wasn't one to boast about her achievements or flaunt her success. In fact, if you walked past her on the busy streets of Manhattan, you'd probably miss her entirely. Yet, despite the anonymity that the city offered her, Olivia carried a light, a simple warmth that she didn't even realize the world needed until someone, quite by accident, noticed it. Olivia had worked at Miller Enterprises for 3 months. The job was everything she had hoped for: a stable position, steady pay, and a chance to build a future. But the stability came at a cost. The life of a junior assistant in the finance department wasn't exactly glamorous. It wasn't the kind of role where you could escape the mundanity of spreadsheets, budgets, and endless reports. The hours were long and the pay barely enough to cover rent in the city. But Olivia didn't mind. She wasn't here for grandeur. She was here for something simpler, a sense of purpose. She had always lived her life in a manner that was discreet, unassuming, and humble. Unlike the other young professionals around her, Olivia didn't see the need for lavish dinners or designer handbags. Instead, her life outside the office revolved around something much more personal, something that kept her grounded in a world that often seemed to chase after things that didn't matter. Every evening, after long hours at work, Olivia would make a detour on her way home to the corner market just down the street from her apartment. It wasn't much. A small, dimly lit store where you could buy a loaf of bread, some granola bars, and juice for cheap, but it became her ritual. She would walk out, bags in hand, with no particular destination in mind. That's when she crossed the street and arrived at her nightly destination, a street corner where a small group of homeless people gathered every evening. Some of them sat on worn-out blankets, some leaned against the cold concrete of the sidewalk, but all of them shared the same quiet resilience. The kind of resilience that comes with a life spent surviving on the margins. And it was there, in the shadow of the towering buildings of Manhattan, where Olivia found a sense of purpose that the corporate world couldn't give her. She'd walk over every single night with bags of bread, granola bars, and juice. "Good evening, everyone," she would say, kneeling beside the elderly man named Marvin, or the young woman Ellen, who had been on the streets for too long. "Tonight we have some juice and granola bars," she would announce, the words becoming a ritual. She would smile at them, handing out the food, watching as their tired faces lit up with gratitude. There was a quiet joy in their eyes, a joy that Olivia had learned to cherish. It was small, but in that moment it was enough to make her heart feel full. What others didn't know, what no one at Miller Enterprises could see, was that these moments were what kept Olivia going. There was something in her heart, an unshakable belief that this was what mattered most, that no matter how hard her day had been or how little she had left to give, these small acts of kindness made her life worth living. And if anyone were to ask her why she did it, the answer would always be the same. It wasn't for recognition. It wasn't to feel good about herself. It wasn't even because she had anything to give. It was simply because she could. And sometimes that was all that mattered. But little did she know, the person who would change the course of her life was watching. From the top floor of the sleek, imposing office building that housed Miller Enterprises, the city sprawled out beneath Logan Miller. The towering skyscrapers, the millions of lives intertwining below, all seemed so distant from his view. But Logan wasn't interested in the view. He was interested in results. He was the CEO of Miller Enterprises, one of the most successful tech companies in the country, and his life was ruled by productivity, profit margins, and sharp decision-making. People in Logan's world were assets, tools to build empires. He didn't waste his time on the insignificant things, the small gestures of kindness that the world seemed to value. He wasn't the type to pay attention to his employees, lives outside of work. They were workers and they had a job to do. It was that simple. But for some reason there was one employee who had caught his attention. Olivia. At first it was a passing observation, just another employee leaving work, walking down the street. But then Logan started to notice the pattern. Every evening, without fail, Olivia left the office and headed straight to that corner market. Every evening she returned to the same group of homeless individuals, handing them whatever she could afford. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a coincidence. It became routine. And Logan couldn't stop watching. He wasn't someone who was easily moved. He had a clear sense of what was important: profit, efficiency, productivity. But there was something about Olivia's actions that didn't make sense. She was young, working in a low-paying job, struggling to make ends meet, yet she consistently spent her own money on people who couldn't offer her anything in return. No praise, no gratitude, no promise of future favor. And still, she kept going. Logan wasn't the type to ask questions about other people's lives, but for some reason he found himself wondering. What did she get out of it? Why was she doing this? Was it some sort of guilt-driven obligation? Or was it something more? He couldn't shake the thought of Olivia. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't ignore her anymore. There was something about Olivia that piqued his curiosity. She wasn't like the others. She didn't live her life chasing after the same things that everyone else did. She didn't care about climbing the corporate ladder or getting ahead in the world. She didn't expect anything from anyone. She simply gave without asking for anything in return. And that's what intrigued him. Logan Miller wasn't used to being intrigued. He was used to being in control, to manipulating the game and coming out on top. But with Olivia, there was no game to play. There were no rules. It was simply her, doing what she could to make the world a little bit better. And that bothered him, because it didn't fit into his worldview. It didn't make sense. Still, something in him couldn't let it go. And that's when he decided he had to find out more. So, one evening, after a long day of meetings and negotiations, Logan found himself watching Olivia again. He stood at the window, his sharp gaze focused on her as she knelt on the sidewalk, handing out food to the homeless. There was a sense of peace in the way she moved, a calmness that came from knowing she was doing something good. Logan's mind raced. What was it that made her do this every day? What was it that drove her to sacrifice so much for people who would never be able to repay her? In that moment, Logan knew that he needed to understand Olivia better. She was no longer just another employee. She had become an enigma, a mystery that he was determined to unravel. And so he made a decision that would change everything. He was going to meet her. He was going to find out why she did what she did, and he was going to see where it would take them. It was a day like any other. The morning rush had passed. The hum of phones and keyboards filled the air, and the sharp, focused atmosphere of Miller Enterprises seemed to continue in its usual rhythm. Olivia sat at her desk, buried in the usual mountain of paperwork. The financial reports were unending. The spreadsheets were meticulous and the emails relentless. As the junior assistant, her role often meant that she was the last person anyone paid attention to, but Olivia had grown accustomed to this. She had learned to disappear into the fabric of the corporate world, a shadow who worked diligently but quietly. But today, something was different. As she typed, her mind kept wandering back to the street corner where she would be later, handing out food to the homeless. She couldn't explain why, but there was an almost magnetic pull to it. The small group of people, Marvin, Ellen, and Paul, had become her family, the ones who, in her small, quiet way, she felt she could help. As she sat in her office, the quiet buzz of her phone was a reminder of what was waiting for her after hours. A small piece of peace, a sense of purpose that could not be found in spreadsheets. She shook her head slightly, trying to push the thoughts aside. But then, as she looked at her desk, she felt a presence near her. A shadow, tall and commanding, hovered at her workspace. The sound of footsteps ceased, and she could feel her heart skip a beat. She didn't even need to look up to know who. It was Logan Miller, CEO of Miller Enterprises, was standing right beside her desk. "Olivia Anderson," he said, his voice steady and deep. She looked up, startled by the directness. His gaze was as sharp as his reputation. He was not the type of man to mingle with the lower ranks, let alone acknowledge the mundane details of employees' lives. And yet, here he was staring down at her with his usual air of cool detachment. "Mr. Miller," she managed, the words escaping her lips almost automatically. The man who ran this empire, the one whose name was synonymous with success, was speaking to her. And for the first time in months, she felt a knot tighten in her chest, not from fear, but from the weight of the unexpected attention. "How long have you been working here?" he asked, his tone calculated, as if this was part of some business assessment. She wasn't sure if he genuinely cared, but there was something in the way he asked the question that made her nervous. "A few months," she replied, straightening up in her chair, unsure whether to make eye contact. He continued to look at her, scrutinizing her every movement, almost as if he were measuring her worth. The tension in the air felt thick, and Olivia shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just a casual check-in, this was something else. She could feel the weight of his gaze pressing on her. "Do you like your job?" His question came again, and for a moment Olivia hesitated. Was it a trick question? Was this some sort of test? After all, Logan Miller wasn't known for engaging with the staff in such personal ways. He ran a tight ship and employees were there to work, not to waste time on small talk. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out immediately. It wasn't just the nature of the question, it was the way it was asked. There was an undercurrent to it that made her feel like she was being analyzed in a way that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or reports. Yes, she said finally, forcing a smile that didn't feel entirely natural. It's challenging, and I'm learning a lot. Her answer seemed to satisfy him for the moment. He nodded curtly, as if this was enough for him, as if he had already moved past her response and onto something else. Good, he said, almost as an afterthought before turning on his heel and walking away. The sound of his shoes echoed in the hallway as he disappeared into the elevator, leaving Olivia sitting there bewildered. What had just happened? The CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world had come to her desk and asked her a couple of simple questions, and yet the way he asked them, the intensity of his gaze, made it feel as though something far deeper was unfolding, something she couldn't quite grasp. Olivia tried to shake off the unease as she went back to her work, but that brief encounter stuck with her, gnawing at her mind. What did he want from her? Why had he paid attention to her at all? She was just one of the thousands of employees after all. And yet in that short exchange, she felt like something had shifted. It wasn't until later that afternoon that she realized what had been bothering her. It wasn't just the CEO's presence, it was the curiosity in his eyes. Logan Miller wasn't someone who wasted time on inconsequential things. He didn't waste time on small gestures, on insignificant acts. He was known for being cold, for being business-minded to the point of ruthlessness. So why had he shown interest in her? Why had he singled her out of everyone else? She had no answer, but deep down she had a feeling that this was only the beginning. The day passed, and Olivia did her best to focus. But as the clock inched toward the end of the workday, she couldn't shake the thought of what awaited her outside the building. The homeless people, Marvin, Ellen, Paul. They were always there, and she always came through for them. It was her ritual, her routine, and she couldn't imagine her day without it. As the office began to empty out, she grabbed her things and headed toward the small corner market she visited every night. She bought what she could afford: bread, juice, and granola bars. The same items she bought every night. She paid, then stepped outside into the crisp evening air, the sounds of the city rushing around her as the familiar faces of the homeless group appeared before her. She greeted them with a smile, offering them the simple items she had brought. And as she knelt to hand out the food, she felt the same warmth fill her chest, that same comforting sense of fulfillment that always came when she knew she had done something good. This was where she truly found peace, where the noise of the corporate world didn't matter, and where she could forget about the pressures of deadlines and the sharp gaze of Logan Miller. But tonight was different. As Olivia handed out the food, she could feel a presence lingering nearby. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Logan Miller had followed her. He stood at a distance watching her interact with the homeless group. The scene was foreign to him, an uncomfortable contrast to the pristine, business-focused world he inhabited. His sharp, analytical mind couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. She was just a young woman with little money to her name, someone who worked in his company. Yet here she was, giving away her time and resources to people who had nothing to offer her in return. Why? Why would she do this? Logan wasn't used to this kind of selflessness. He was used to people doing things for a reason, for a return. He had built his empire on transactions, on give and take. But Olivia? She was different. She gave without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. It was an alien concept to him. And for the first time in a long while, Logan Miller felt something shift inside him. As he watched her kneel, laughing softly with the homeless group, something inside him stirred. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the image of Olivia, offering what little she had to those who had nothing, was haunting. It was a stark reminder of a world he had long since shut out. A world that operated on empathy, on kindness, on things that couldn't be measured in profits. The moment stretched on, and Logan realized that he had been watching her for much longer than he had intended. But before he could make a decision about what to do next, he heard the faint sound of a car door slamming, and Olivia was walking away from the group, heading down the street as she always did. Logan stood there for a long moment, watching her silhouette disappear into the distance, Something inside him wanted to call out to her, to stop her, but he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked back into the building, the image of Olivia giving everything she had to those in need etched in his mind. As the days passed, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia had somehow changed the way he viewed the world. It wasn't just her actions. It was the quiet strength with which she carried herself, the way she didn't seek recognition, the way she gave without expecting anything in return. It was a stark contrast to everything he had ever believed in, and yet it stirred something in him that he couldn't ignore. And so, as Olivia continued her daily routine, Logan continued to watch. Only this time, it wasn't just out of curiosity. It was because, for reasons he didn't fully understand, he wanted to know more. What was it about Olivia that made her so different? And what would happen if he got closer to the answers? Logan had already decided he was going to find out. The days that followed were strangely quiet for Olivia. She continued her routine, as if nothing had changed, yet she couldn't escape the growing feeling that something monumental was about to happen. It wasn't just the lingering thought of Logan watching her from his office every evening, or the way his presence felt like a constant weight on her mind. It was something deeper, an undeniable shift in the way she was seeing herself, and in the way others, especially Logan, were beginning to see her. The morning after Logan had asked her those seemingly innocent questions, Olivia had arrived at the office to find everything had returned to its usual hum. The spreadsheets, the reports, the constant stream of emails, they were all still there, a never-ending avalanche of tasks. But now there was something more. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Logan, to his unexpected attention. What did he want from her? And why did she feel so unsettled by it? By midday, her usual focus on work had been replaced by an internal battle. She couldn't stop wondering if she had imagined everything. The way Logan had studied her that day, the way his eyes seemed to linger longer than necessary, almost like he was trying to decipher her, to understand her. But why would he? What could he possibly see in a young assistant like her, someone so far removed from the rarefied world he inhabited? And yet his presence lingered on her thoughts, refusing to be pushed away. When the clock struck 5 and it was time for Olivia to leave for her usual visit to the homeless group, she almost didn't go. The idea of seeing them, their tired, grateful faces, felt oddly comforting, but something about the evening seemed different. Maybe it was the knowledge that Logan was still watching her from his office. Maybe it was the anticipation that she was about to face something far more complicated than a simple act of kindness. With a sigh, she grabbed her bag and stepped out of the building, trying to shake the unease that had settled in her chest. The market felt familiar, almost like a sanctuary in the chaos of her life. But as she passed the familiar store entrance, she felt something she hadn't expected, a flicker of hesitation. Logan's shadow lingered in her mind, an invisible presence that seemed to follow her even in the most mundane moments. She made her way to the group of homeless people, as she always did, and began distributing the food. Marvin's face lit up when he saw her as usual, his gratitude and kindness a stark contrast to the harshness of the world around him. But as Olivia knelt beside him, handing him a juice box, she caught a glimpse of Logan's silhouette in the window of the building above. His gaze was fixed on her, intense and steady, as if he were watching her every move. The air seemed to thicken, and for the first time in a long while, Olivia felt a pang of discomfort. After a while, she finished handing out the food and stood to leave, her thoughts still tangled in the mess of Logan's sudden and inexplicable presence in her life. The walk back to her apartment was long, but it gave her the time she needed to think. What was she supposed to do with all of this? How could she continue living her simple life, doing what little she could for those in need when her path was becoming more and more entangled with the world of the wealthy and powerful? Her phone buzzed just as she approached her building. A message from Logan Miller. "Meet me in my office tomorrow at noon. We need to talk." Olivia stopped in her tracks, her heart thudding in her chest. Talk? With Logan Miller? The same man who had barely noticed her existence before now? She swallowed hard, staring at the message as if the words themselves held the power to change everything. What did he want? What could he possibly want to talk about? It was hard to shake the feeling that this was something far more significant than a casual conversation. The next day, Olivia arrived at work early, her mind swirling with 100 unanswered questions. She had barely sat down at her desk when she received another message from Logan. "See you at noon. Don't be late." She tried to focus on the task at hand, but the minutes felt like hours as the anticipation built inside her. By the time noon arrived, Olivia had worked herself into a quiet frenzy. She gathered her things and made her way to the 35th floor, her heart racing with every step. As she approached his office, she noticed the sleek dark door that separated the world of high-powered executives from the lower ranks. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob for a moment before she pushed it open, stepping into a room that felt both intimidating and surreal. Logan was sitting behind his desk, his sharp eyes already trained on her as she entered. He didn't smile. He didn't even acknowledge her presence in the way she had expected. Instead, he studied her quietly for a moment, as if weighing something in his mind. It was the same way he had looked at her before, with that same quiet intensity. Olivia took a deep breath and forced herself to meet his gaze, trying to steady the nerves that were threatening to overwhelm her. "Olivia," Logan said, his voice steady and measured. "I've been watching you." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and Olivia's stomach fluttered with a mix of confusion and anxiety. Watching her? What did that even mean? Was this about her helping the homeless? Had someone seen her? Did it matter? "You've been giving your time and money to those people on the street," Logan continued, his tone shifting slightly, "and I want to know why." Olivia blinked, surprised by the question. Why? Why did she do it? Was that really the question? She had never thought much about it. She had simply done it because she could, because she saw people who needed help, and she had the means to offer what little she could. It was as simple as that. But now, with Logan staring at her, awaiting an answer, it seemed as though the simplicity of it all wasn't enough. I help because I can," Olivia said, her voice quieter than she had intended. "Because I've seen them struggle. And if I were in their place, I'd want someone to help me. It's not about recognition. It's not about anything other than doing what I can." Logan's gaze softened slightly, but it didn't lose its intensity. He leaned forward, his fingers steepled on the desk in front of him. "And you've been doing this every day, without fail. Every single day you've spent your time, your money, and your energy helping people who will never be able to repay you." Olivia nodded, unsure where this conversation was leading. She had expected to talk about work, about her role in the company, but this felt different. It felt like Logan wasn't just talking about her actions. He was talking about her as a person. He was trying to understand who she was, why she did the things she did. "Don't you think that's a bit reckless?" Logan asked, his voice still calm, but there was an edge to it now. "You're giving away things that you can't afford to lose. Your time, your money, your resources. You're making yourself vulnerable, Olivia." "Why?" The question hung in the air, and Olivia took a long breath. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, could feel the pressure building inside her chest. He wasn't asking her to justify her actions. He was challenging her. Why was she doing it? What drove her to give so much of herself to people who would never offer anything in return? "I don't need to be paid back," Olivia said finally, her voice steadier now. "I do it because it's the right thing to do. I don't know. Maybe I'm the one who needs it. Maybe helping them helps me feel like I'm doing something good in the world. Maybe it's because I'm tired of people who only do things for themselves. I want to believe that we're capable of something better." Logan sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping slowly on the desk. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And then, as if making a decision, he leaned forward again, his gaze now locked on hers. "You're an interesting person, Olivia," he said, his voice softer now. "And I think you deserve more than this." She frowned, confused. "More than what?" He looked at her, his eyes still focused and intense. "More than living paycheck to paycheck. More than giving everything you have to people who can't give you anything in return. I want to offer you something, Olivia. Something that could change your life." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. What was he saying? Was this some kind of offer? But before she could speak, Logan continued. "I want to make you a proposal. Something that will help you do more than just scrape by. I want to invest in you, Olivia. I want you to work directly with me, to take on a role that will challenge you in ways you never imagined. I'll give you the resources, the support. All you have to do is accept." Olivia's mind was spinning. She hadn't expected this, didn't know what to say. But there in Logan's office, with the weight of his proposal hanging in the air, Olivia felt something shift inside her. This was more than an opportunity. This was a moment that could change everything. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. but deep down she knew she couldn't ignore it. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she simply nodded, her eyes meeting his with a quiet determination. Whatever happened next, Olivia knew one thing for sure. Her life was about to change, and so was Logan's. Olivia's world shifted that day in Logan's office, but it wasn't an instant transformation. Instead, it felt like the gradual erosion of a long-held belief that she was fine living the way she had been, helping where she could and doing her best to make a difference, one small act at a time. Now standing on the precipice of something bigger, Olivia wasn't sure whether she was ready to leap, or if she even wanted to. Logan's proposal had been clear. Work for him directly, take on a role that could offer her more than she had ever dreamed of, challenge her, and support her in ways she had never experienced. The offer was tempting, a doorway into a new world, but it felt like a betrayal of the very life she had cultivated for herself. She had worked hard to stay grounded, to stay true to the small, simple life she had chosen, despite the chaos that surrounded her every day. Helping the homeless, giving without expecting anything in return. This was her way of making a difference, and yet the proposition Logan had put on the table couldn't be ignored. It was too significant, too promising to pretend it didn't matter. For the next few days, Olivia was a bundle of conflicting emotions. The office was the same. Work was just as demanding as it had always been, and her interactions with her colleagues were typical. They didn't know about Logan's proposal yet, and Olivia hadn't told anyone. It was too personal, too much for her to process. She needed time to think, time to make sense of the whirlwind of feelings Logan had stirred inside her. She continued her routine, buying snacks at the small corner market after work and heading toward the group of homeless people she had come to see as her second family. They greeted her warmly and she gave them the food she had bought, her heart warming as she watched their tired faces light up with appreciation. But even here, where she usually found comfort, something felt different. Logan's eyes, his questions, his offer, they followed her. He was no longer just the distant, powerful CEO she had worked for. He was a man who had seen her, who had noticed something about her that no one else had. It was unsettling and thrilling at the same time. What was it that had drawn him to her? She had spent days trying to understand it, but nothing made sense. Why her? Why this? She wasn't someone special, just a young woman trying to make a difference in the world. Yet Logan's offer spoke to her in a way that nothing else ever had. It was as though he saw a potential in her that she hadn't seen in herself. He wanted her to break free of the life she had carved out, to step into a world of high stakes, fast decisions, and unimaginable wealth. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, and she didn't know whether to embrace it or run as far as she could from it. Her thoughts plagued her that evening as she left the group and walked back to her apartment. The streets were empty, the dim, lights from the street lamps casting long shadows on the pavement. She barely noticed the distance, lost in the storm of her thoughts. And then, as if the universe had conspired to push her forward, her phone buzzed again. A message from Logan. "I'll be at the office tomorrow at noon. Let's talk about your decision. Don't keep me waiting." Her heart skipped a beat. The finality in his message left no room for doubt. He was serious. This wasn't just some passing suggestion. This was an invitation, a demand. Logan wanted an answer, and he wasn't going to let her off the hook easily. The next day, Olivia walked into the office with a sense of heaviness hanging over her. The fluorescent lights flickered as she made her way down the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. She passed the familiar faces of her coworkers, exchanging pleasantries with some, avoiding the glances of others who couldn't seem to look at her without judgment. They didn't know what she was going through. They didn't know what Logan had offered her. But she could feel their curiosity, their whispering about the assistant who had suddenly caught the attention of the CEO. She arrived at Logan's office at exactly noon, the sharp click of her heels announcing her presence before she even stepped inside. His office door was already open, and as she walked in, Logan didn't stand. He remained seated at his desk, his eyes lifting to meet hers as she entered. There was no need for pleasantries. Neither of them had the time for them. "Olivia," Logan said, his tone cool but not unfriendly. "You've had time to think, I assume." She nodded slowly, swallowing the lump that had formed in her throat. There were so many things she wanted to say, but the words wouldn't come. "I've thought about it a lot," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "And I don't know if I'm ready for this." She wasn't sure what she expected from Logan, but she was taken aback by the way he seemed to study her, like she was an equation he was trying to solve. He didn't speak for a moment, just leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. It was as though he were waiting for her to change her mind, to give him the answer he wanted. But Olivia wasn't sure what that answer was. "Olivia," Logan said, breaking the silence, "you can stay in your comfortable little life, helping the homeless, keeping to your routine. You can keep living paycheck to paycheck, doing what you've always done. But if you really want to make a difference, if you really want to do something that matters, then you need to step outside of your comfort zone. You need to believe in yourself the way I believe in you." Her chest tightened as she processed his words. It wasn't about money or fame or anything Logan could give her. It was about changing the world, her world. He was offering her something more than a job. He was offering her a chance to become something more than she ever thought she could be. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you choose me?" Logan's eyes softened slightly, but there was no hesitation in his answer. "Because you're not like the others. You don't care about the spotlight. You don't want anything in return. You do what you do because it's the right thing to do. You have more integrity than anyone I know, and that's why I think you can handle this." Olivia swallowed, feeling a mixture of pride and fear wash over her. She had never thought of herself as someone who was capable of doing more. She had always been content with small acts of kindness, with making a difference in the world in the only way she knew how. But this was different. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something bigger. "What would I have to do?" she asked, her voice steady now, though the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Logan leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You'd work directly with me. You'd be a part of the team that drives this company forward. I'll teach you everything you need to know, and I'll be there every step of the way. You'll have the resources, the opportunity. But most of all, you'll have the chance to do something that matters, to make real change." The silence that followed felt thick with anticipation. Olivia felt the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy blanket. She was at a crossroads, a moment in time where everything could change. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't know if I can do it." Logan's expression softened, and he stood up slowly, crossing the room to where she stood. For the first time, he seemed more human, less the cold CEO who had watched her from his office. He seemed almost vulnerable, like he was putting something on the line by offering her this chance. "You're stronger than you think, Olivia," he said softly. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to believe that you can do it." His words lingered in the air, and Olivia felt the truth of them deep in her bones. She wasn't ready. She wasn't sure if she would ever feel ready. But maybe that was the point. Maybe readiness wasn't something she had to wait for. Maybe it was something she had to step into, one decision at a time. With a deep breath, she nodded. "I'll do it," she said, the words coming out with more confidence than she had expected. "I'll take the chance." Logan smiled then, and for the first time Olivia saw the person behind the powerful CEO. The man who saw potential in her, who believed in her in ways she couldn't quite grasp yet. It wasn't just about business. It was about something much more personal, something that had the power to change everything. And in that moment, Olivia knew that her life would never be the same again. The door to a new world had opened, and she was about to walk through it. The days following Olivia's decision were a blur of excitement and uncertainty. Each morning, she woke up to the overwhelming realization that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have predicted. Logan's world, the one filled with power, influence, and endless possibilities, was now her world too. She had made the choice to step into it, and now she had to prove to herself and to him that she was capable of handling it. But it wasn't going to be easy. The first day she arrived at Logan's office for her new role, she was greeted with an intensity she hadn't anticipated. The sleek modern space that once seemed so distant, so unreachable, now felt like an intimidating maze of power and expectation. Her heart raced as she walked through the halls, her steps echoing in the quiet morning air. Everything around her was bigger, more lavish, everything but her own confidence, which seemed to shrink with every step she took. She had been working here for months, but this was different. This was no longer the same Olivia, the humble assistant, who quietly went about her day helping the homeless. Now she was expected to rise to a level she wasn't sure she was prepared for. When she entered Logan's office, the first thing she noticed was his presence. He was at the far end of the room, standing by the window, gazing out at the bustling city below. There was something different about him today, something more personal in the way he carried himself. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable. He wasn't the man who looked at her with detached curiosity anymore. He was the man who had placed his trust in her, and that trust was heavier than any paycheck or title. Logan turned when he heard her enter, and for a moment there was a pause, an unspoken understanding between them. He didn't greet her in the way she had grown accustomed to. Instead, he studied her for a few moments, as if waiting for something to click, something to happen between them that would mark the start of a new journey. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and steady. "Are you ready for this?" She met his gaze, trying to keep her hands steady, though they trembled slightly in her lap. Was she ready? The question had been nagging at her since she had made the decision, and now that she was here, it felt more real than ever. "I think so," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've been thinking about this, Logan, about everything you said, about what's next." Logan nodded slowly, walking toward her and leaning against his desk. There was no need for elaborate pleasantries today. They had passed that point. "You don't need to have all the answers right now. I didn't expect you to," he said. His gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Olivia saw the man behind the suit, behind the polished exterior. "But I need you to trust me. This is going to be harder than anything you've done, but I believe in you. That's why I've brought you here. I think you have the potential to be more than you ever realized." Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat. His words were both a comfort and a burden. Logan believed in her. That was something she hadn't expected to hear, something that felt foreign in a world where she had always been the one doing the believing. She had always been the one supporting, never the one being supported. But now it felt like the weight of someone else's belief was heavy on her shoulders. It was both freeing and terrifying. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything. You've promised," she said, looking down at her hands. "I don't know if I can be the person you think I am." "You are," Logan said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You just don't see it yet, but you will." For the first time, Olivia wondered if Logan was right. She had never thought of herself as someone who could rise to the level he was offering her. She had always kept herself grounded, focused on the small things. The homeless people she helped, the daily routine she followed. These were the things that defined her. They were the things that gave her purpose. But here, in Logan's world, those things seemed so small, so distant. She had never thought about power, about money, about influence the way Logan did, but now it was her reality. The following weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences and challenges. Logan was true to his word. He took Olivia under his wing, teaching her the ins and outs of the company, showing her how to navigate the complex world of business and high-stakes decisions. She sat in meetings with executives, listened to their ideas and strategies, and was slowly, almost painfully, learning how to think in ways she had never considered before. There were moments when she felt completely out of her depth, like a fish thrown into the deep end of the ocean. But there were also moments when she surprised herself. When she spoke up in a meeting, offering insights that even Logan seemed to take seriously. When she stayed late to perfect a report, pushing herself beyond the limits she had once thought were impossible. Logan's belief in her, his unwavering support, pushed her in ways she never thought she could be pushed. And slowly she started to believe in herself too. But with every new accomplishment, every step closer to proving herself, there was a growing tension inside her. She was no longer the person she had been. She wasn't just helping the homeless anymore. She was climbing the corporate ladder, making deals, shaking hands with people whose names she didn't even recognize. It was exhilarating and terrifying, all at once. The more she succeeded, the further she felt from the world she had once known. She could feel the pull of both worlds tugging at her heart. The world of compassion, of helping others, and the world of power, success, and influence that Logan had shown her. It was in one of those moments of doubt when she stood in her office late at night, staring out at the city below, that it hit her. She had changed. Logan had changed her. But she had also changed herself. The things she had once considered important now seemed so small, so fleeting. The life she had built for herself, the world she had crafted through small acts of kindness, felt distant. In its place was a new world, one where her every decision could impact not just her future, but the future of the company, the people she worked with, and even the people she cared about. That realization both terrified and thrilled her. And yet, as she stood there, she knew that she couldn't go back. The path she had chosen had already been set in motion, and no matter how hard she tried to fight it, it was impossible to deny what lay ahead. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It wasn't just about the money or the success. It was about something deeper, something she couldn't quite articulate. A bond had been forged between her and Logan, one that went beyond professional interests. She was drawn to him in ways that were both logical and irrational, ways that unsettled her, and yet made her feel more alive than she had ever felt before. He was the catalyst for this change, but Olivia knew that it was her own strength, her own resolve, that would determine whether she would thrive or crumble under the weight of it all. And as the days passed, Logan's presence became both a comfort and a challenge. He pushed her, yes, but he also trusted her in ways no one else ever had. When she faltered, he was there to guide her. When she succeeded, he was there to acknowledge it. But it wasn't just his belief in her that made the difference. It was the way he made her believe in herself. The tension between them grew with each passing day. It was subtle at first, a glance here, a touch there, but it was undeniable. Olivia could feel it in the air whenever they were in the same room. She knew it wasn't just her ambition that drew her closer to Logan. It was something more, something that had the power to change everything, but she couldn't afford to entertain those thoughts. She couldn't afford to let them take over, to let them cloud her judgment. She had a job to do, a life to rebuild, and a future to secure. And yet, as the days turned into weeks, the line between professional respect and something more became harder and harder to ignore. Olivia was no longer just Logan Miller's assistant. She was someone who was capable of achieving greatness on her own, someone who had earned her place in this new world. And the question she had to answer was this: was she willing to let that greatness come at the cost of everything she had once believed? It was a question that would haunt her for days, for weeks, and perhaps for the rest of her life. But it was a question she was willing to face, because deep down she knew that the woman she was becoming was stronger than the one she had been before. And no matter what happened next, she was ready for it. The sun had barely begun to rise over the skyline, painting the city in shades of gold and rose. Olivia stood at the window of her new office, her gaze distant. The view was one of luxury and power, the city sprawling beneath her like a kingdom, with her standing on the precipice, trying to decide where she belonged within it. The familiar buzz of her phone brought her back to the present, and she picked it up with a sigh. It was a message from Logan. Meeting in my office now. Her heart skipped a beat. There was always a sense of urgency in Logan's messages, but this one felt different. He had been unusually distant in the past few days. Their interactions had become strained, less frequent. Something was changing, and Olivia wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever came next. The path she had been walking was no longer clear. The line between professional and personal had become blurred, and she had no idea where it would lead. She slipped her phone back into her pocket and straightened her blouse, taking a deep breath. It wasn't just the meeting that had her nerves on edge. It was the growing tension between them, the undeniable chemistry that seemed to pulse in the air whenever they were together. Logan had been her mentor, her guide, and now she feared he was becoming something else entirely. As she made her way to his office, the weight of her thoughts pressed down on her. This was no longer just about her job. It was about a deeper, more personal struggle. The things she had once held onto, her routines, her ideals, her sense of self, were slipping through her fingers. She could feel herself changing in ways that frightened her. Olivia knocked once on the door, and Logan's deep voice called out to her, "Come in." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Logan was sitting behind his massive desk, his back turned to her as he stared out at the city. The room, as always, was immaculate. The polished wood, the gleaming glass, the sleek black leather furniture, all of it screamed success, precision, and control. But today, it felt different. It felt like a space where decisions that would alter her life were about to be made. "Sit down," Logan said without turning, his tone flat. There was no greeting, no warmth, only the weight of expectation. Olivia hesitated, but then obeyed, sitting down across from him. She felt small in the massive chair, surrounded by the cold, imposing walls of his office. She could see his reflection in the window, his face a mask of stoic concentration. For the first time in a long while, she felt out of place. "I've been watching you, Olivia." Logan finally spoke, his voice low, controlled, but with an edge of something she couldn't quite place. "You've been doing great, better than I expected. But now I need to know something." Olivia's pulse quickened. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment when her efforts would be measured, when Logan would tell her if she had truly earned her place here. But there was something in his tone that made her wary. She had seen him make decisions that affected the lives of others with a single word. And today it seemed it was her turn to be under his scrutiny. "I want to know if you're really ready for this," Logan continued, his voice hardening slightly. "For everything this company stands for the kind of power and responsibility that comes with it." Her chest tightened at his words. Ready? She had worked so hard to prove herself, to rise beyond her humble beginnings, to be someone worthy of his attention. But now, in the face of his cold gaze, doubt crept in. Was she ready? She had been so focused on her goals, on the path ahead, that she hadn't stopped to ask herself if she could truly handle everything that came with it. "I think so," she said quietly, her voice more uncertain than she intended. "But I'm still trying to figure it out. I've been trying to keep up with the responsibilities, the expectations, but sometimes it feels like I'm losing myself." Logan turned in his chair to face her, his expression unreadable. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words, and then for the first time in days, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "You're not losing yourself," he said, his voice softer now. "You're becoming someone else, someone stronger, more capable. And that's what this company needs. Someone who can rise above the chaos, who can make decisions that matter. But you have to stop holding yourself back, Olivia. You have to embrace it." His words hit her like a wave, crashing over her with an intensity she hadn't expected. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove herself to others, trying to fit into a world that never truly felt like hers. But now in this moment, she realized that it wasn't about fitting in anymore. It was about owning her place, about claiming the power she had always had inside her but never truly acknowledged. She sat up straighter, her mind racing. Logan had a way of making her see things differently, of making her confront her own doubts and fears head on. But today, his words carried more weight than ever before. "I don't know how to let go of the past," Olivia admitted, her voice quiet. "The way I've always seen things, the way I've always helped others. I'm afraid that if I let go of that, I'll lose who I am." Logan's eyes softened and he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk. "You don't have to lose who you are. Helping others, caring for people, those things don't have to disappear. But you have to realize that you don't have to sacrifice your own dreams, your own ambitions to help others. You can be both." Olivia felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief and fear. For so long she had thought that she couldn't have it all, that to succeed she would have to give up the part of herself that cared for others. But Logan was offering her a different perspective, one that didn't require sacrifice, one that allowed her to be both strong and compassionate, ambitious and selfless. "What do you want from me, Logan?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "What do you really expect from me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the window again, looking out over the city. The light from the setting sun bathed his face in a warm golden glow, making him seem even more distant, more unreachable. "I expect you to stop holding back," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "I expect you to take what you deserve, to stop doubting yourself and to step into the role I've prepared for you. It's time, Olivia. You've earned it." His words hung in the air, and for a moment everything felt still. The weight of what he was offering her, what he was demanding of her, was overwhelming. This wasn't just about a promotion, a job, or a title. This was about her future, her identity, and the person she was becoming. Logan had given her the chance to rise, to take the next step, but now it was up to her to decide whether she was willing to claim it. She looked at him, her mind swirling with a mix of emotions, fear, excitement, and something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge before. The attraction she felt for him was undeniable, but it wasn't just physical. It was something about the way he believed in her, the way he saw her potential before she could even see it herself. And for the first time, she realized that this wasn't just about her career. This was about the future they could build together, if she was brave enough to take the leap. "I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I want to try. I want to be more than just someone who helps others. I want to be someone who makes a difference." Logan looked at her, his gaze piercing, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes, something that wasn't just professional, but personal. You already are, he said quietly. But you have to believe it. You have to stop holding back. For the first time, Olivia felt the weight of her own potential, the power of her choices. The past few months had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. But now, as she sat across from Logan, she knew that it was just the beginning. She was ready to step into this new life, to embrace the person she had become, and to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. And as she left his office that day, with the weight of his words lingering in her mind, she couldn't help but feel that something had shifted between them. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about something more, something that neither of them could deny. And for the first time, she felt a sense of clarity. She was ready. Ready for whatever came next. Ready for the future. Ready for Logan. As the days rolled on, Olivia found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions that she couldn't control. The pressure that came with the job she was now responsible for was immense. But with that pressure came a strange, exhilarating sense of power. She had come a long way from the shy, uncertain woman who had once felt out of place in the glossy glass-walled towers of Logan's world. Every challenge she faced, every hurdle she cleared, added another layer to the person she was becoming. But there was still that lingering question in her mind, the one that gnawed at her late at night when the office was empty and the world outside seemed to fall away. Was she truly ready for this? Could she balance the person she had always been with the ambitious, driven woman she was becoming? It was a question she had never fully asked herself before. The reality of who she was and who she was becoming was harder to face than she thought. She had always been the one to give to others, to sacrifice her own time and energy for those who needed it most. But now, as she stood on the edge of something much bigger than herself, she realized that it was no longer about just helping others. It was about defining her own worth, her own place in this world. Logan had pushed her, yes, but the real challenge was her own belief in herself. One quiet morning, Olivia sat at her desk, staring at the stack of paperwork before her. The day had started like any other. The hum of the office, the sound of the phone ringing, and the constant buzz of emails filled the space. She had settled into this routine. The constant motion of work, of deadlines, of presentations. But something was different. The air felt thick with anticipation, as if the very walls of the building were holding their breath. It was as though everything she had worked toward, every decision she had made was building to this moment. She heard the familiar click of Logan's shoes echoing down the hallway. She turned just as he stepped into her office. There was no smile, no greeting, only a look in his eyes that made her heart race. "Olivia," he said, his voice low but urgent. "I need you to meet me in the conference room." Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment she was unsure what to expect. They had met in conference rooms countless times before, but this time felt different. The tension was palpable, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something important, something monumental was about to unfold. She gathered her things, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the papers on her desk. She felt the weight of his gaze follow her as she made her way out of her office. Each step felt heavy, laden with the uncertainty of what was to come. She passed by the colleagues, who had once looked at her with curiosity, and now there was a mixture of respect and quiet recognition in their eyes. Olivia had changed in ways they couldn't even fully understand, and neither could she. She wasn't the same person who had first walked into that building, eager to prove herself. Now she was someone else, someone more formidable, yet unsure of where she was headed. As she entered the conference room, Logan was already waiting for her. The room was large, the glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city below. Logan stood by the window, his arms crossed, looking out at the horizon as if he were contemplating something far beyond the walls of this building. "Have a seat," he said without turning, his tone steady. Olivia sat down, her mind racing as she tried to read his expression. She couldn't help but notice the way the sunlight cast shadows on his face, making him appear even more distant, more unapproachable than usual. "I've been thinking," Logan began, his voice measured, "about what comes next. For you. For this company." Her breath caught in her throat. She had always known that Logan was a man of action, a man who thought several steps ahead of everyone else. But now, it felt as if the world was narrowing to this one moment. She had worked for this, fought for it, but she had never fully understood the magnitude of what it meant to truly succeed. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It wasn't even about the company. It was about what this all meant for her. Logan turned to face her, his eyes locked on hers. "You've shown that you can handle the challenges that come your way. But now, I want to know if you're ready for the next step. Her pulse quickened. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The question that had loomed over her, that she had been trying to avoid, was finally here. Was she ready for what Logan wanted from her? Was she ready to take on the mantle of responsibility, to step fully into the role he had envisioned for her? She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. I think so, she said, her voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. But it's not just about the company, is it? It's about something more. Logan studied her for a moment, his gaze intense. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. The space between them seemed to shrink, and Olivia could feel her heart pounding in her chest. You've always been driven by your sense of duty, Logan said quietly. But now it's time to think about what you want, Olivia, not just what others expect from you. The words hit her like a jolt. What did she want? It was a question she had never fully answered for herself. She had spent so much of her life focused on others, on what they needed, what they wanted, what she could give them. But now, standing here, facing Logan's steady gaze, she realized that she had never truly stopped to ask herself what she wanted. What did she need to feel complete? Was it the approval of others, the success of the company, or was it something deeper, something more personal? Logan's voice broke through her thoughts. I want to offer you something. Something more than just a position in this company. I want to offer you a partnership. Olivia's heart stopped. A partnership? Was he offering her more than just a role in the company? Was this the moment where everything would change? She had always admired Logan for his ambition, his ability to build an empire from nothing. But now, standing in front of her, it was as if he was offering her a seat at the table, a seat by his side. Her mind raced as she tried to process his words. A partnership meant more than just business. It meant trust, shared goals, and a deep understanding between them. But it also meant something else, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice trembling. I've worked so hard to get here, but I never thought it would come to this. Logan stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You've earned this, Olivia. You've earned my respect. And now I want to see if you're ready to stand with me. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt like she was on the verge of something monumental. This wasn't just about the company. This was about who she was becoming. It was about the choices she had made, the risks she had taken, and the person she had fought so hard to become. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready to step up. I'm ready to stand with you. Logan's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't just about business. It was something deeper, something personal. Good, he said quietly, because I'm ready too. And with that, everything changed. The path ahead was no longer uncertain. Olivia had stepped into her future, and with it she had accepted not just a partnership with Logan, but a new beginning. The world before her was wide open, full of possibilities and challenges, but for the first time she felt ready to face it all. She had found her place, and it was beside him. Throughout Olivia's journey, she evolves from a humble, dedicated employee to a powerful and confident woman who is ready to take on the world. Through her selflessness, determination, and unwavering belief in the power of helping others, she not only earns the respect of those around her, but also unlocks a path to success that she had never imagined. When Logan offers her a partnership, it signifies her growth and the acknowledgement of her potential. She goes from being uncertain about her worth to confidently stepping into a future that's full of possibilities. Her journey demonstrates that sometimes it takes stepping outside your comfort zone and embracing opportunities that scare you to discover your true strength. The lesson from Olivia's story is that we should never underestimate the power of believing in ourselves even when faced with challenges. By helping others and staying true to our values, we can build a foundation for success that is not just about material achievements, but about the impact we have on the lives of those around us. Quiz. Question. What was the key factor that helped Olivia succeed in her career? A. Her hard work and dedication. B. Logan's support and mentorship. Comment your answer below. What are your thoughts on Olivia's journey? How do you apply this lesson in your own life? Share your views with us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Your support means the world to us.